for Essex and Suffolk Water. So I'll go through these slides, but I'll try not to repeat what Becky's already said. Obviously, we work within the same regulatory structure framework, using the same guidelines. So very similar kind of process and results in a way that we get through the WRMP planning process. So I'll say a little bit about us. The key thing that I think customers and maybe people in the area don't realise, we don't do wastewater. So we cover parts of Essex and Suffolk providing the drinking water, but we don't do any wastewater undertaking duties. That's all Anglian water in our patch. Again, like Becky's mentioned about protecting the environment and sustainability reduction, so where we're leaving more water in the environment and reducing our abstractions. Our best value plan for our WRMP 24, and something that's particularly specific to us is a moratorium, so a delay in us being able to provide some commercial new supplies in our Hartismere zone. And I'll touch a little bit on our adaptive pathways and programmes as well. So if you don't know, Essex and Suffolk Water is part of Northumbrian Water Group. So we actually have, similar to Anglian Water, we have two patches. We have an area in the northeast and then in Essex, Suffolk and Norfolk. So 2 million people in East Anglia and the Greater London boroughs. And similar to Anglian Water, we're operating here in the driest region in the UK, which is designated a serious water stressed area. And we've got the highest proportion of water dependent designated sites as well in the country. So that protecting the environment is something that's very crucial to our plans. So the planning process is set out in the Water Sources Planning Guidelines. And the key things is obviously to maintain a secure supply, a resilient supply to our customers under various conditions, most notably through droughts, whilst making sure we protect and preferably enhancing the environment at the same time. So this is the basic supply-demand balance. This is for our Hartismere in South Suffolk zone, and this is the kind of challenge that we're faced with. So the blue line being the water available we've got to supply customers, and the green line being our demand forecast. So you don't want the lines that way round. That's a problem, and we need to meet that deficit with new options. So this is a bit of a more detailed map of our Norfolk and Suffolk area. So we supply Great Yarmouth from Ormsby Water Treatment Works at the top there, using water from the Trinity Broads, River Bure and some groundwater. We supply North Lowestoft from Fritton Lake and Noun Ponds, South Lowestoft from Barsham Water Treatment Works that uses the River Waveney, and some local groundwater sources as the supply there. And then pretty much south of that, it's all local groundwater sources. There's a little bit of flexibility in the network, but not much. So the local groundwater source will go to the surrounding area for supply. So there's specific objectives that we need to meet in our water source management plan set out by government generally. And to achieve a secure, resilient and sustainable supply of water for our customers. And for this round of planning, we had to move to a 1 in 500 level of resilience by 2040. So a previous plan, it was a 1 in 200 year return period level of resilience. So we are now planning to a far more severe, less common drought than previously, and that's really impacted on the amount of water that we need to find basically in our plan. So the water source management plans are based on a very dry period and ensuring that we can meet supplies through those dry periods. We've got a step change in sustainable abstraction reductions. So new again for this round of planning, incorporating all of those reductions to our abstraction licenses to leave more water in the environment than we did before. Climate change, as Becky mentioned, focus on reducing leakage from both our network and from customers' homes to contribute to the national target of the 50% reduction. Focus on reducing customer demand to 110 litres per head per day by 2050, looking at compulsory metering and smart metering as standard. So a key theme for our plans this time round, more so than ever before, was this factor of abstraction licence reductions. So the basics are we have to apply for the Environment Agency to take water out of the environment from either surface or groundwaters to supply our customers. Those abstractions are in a water stressed area. And so in this AMP, which is a 5-year period between 2020 and 2025, we've investigated pretty much every single one of our Suffolk abstraction licences to determine their level of sustainability. We do that under what's called the Water Industry National Environment Programme, or WINEP for short, it's a bit easier. So looking at groundwater modelling, impact on surface waters, compliance bands, FEs, all these kind of modelling tools to look at how sustainable an abstraction is from the environment. And we are required to pretty much reduce all of our annual abstraction licences on our groundwaters in pretty much the whole of Suffolk under WFD. There are some surface waters where we need to apply new hands-off flows as well to lead more water downstream. And we've incorporated all of these reductions into our baseline supply-demand forecast. As Becky mentioned, environmental destinations are also a new requirement for this round of plans. Didn't exist previously, and these are additional licence reductions to tackle climate change in the future. So WFD, no deterioration, sustainability reductions are all to prevent damage to the environment now under current conditions and existing climate change. Environmental destination looks ahead into the future. So we have to predict what the climate will be, in the 2040s, 50s, and plan to meet further sustainability reductions for them. So as Becky mentioned, we had 3 scenarios that we assessed in these plans. It was statutory for us to meet the business as usual plus, which means meeting the environmental flow indicators everywhere, plus a little bit of local verification to tailor those licence reductions to the specific sources. There is the enhanced environmental destination scenario, and like Anglian Water, we've got a adaptive programme that looks at what the plan might look like and what options we might need to meet an enhanced scenario. So that's going much further, and that's greater than the current FEs. And like Anglian, we're going to investigate at a finer scale, more granular level, those indicative enhanced sustainability attractions that we've incorporated this time round. We're going to put those into our AMP8 WINEP studies and investigate them to ensure that we know exactly what environmental targets we're meeting for specific sites at specific abstraction licenses there. So we've incorporated the BAU plus into our baseline plan this time. And yeah, we'll be doing further investigations, some of those in conjunction with Anglian Water, because obviously a lot of the we're using similar sources of water, and then we have to look at things like the impact on estuaries as well. So we want to be aligned with the process that we're going to be using for those investigations. So Becky mentioned the twin track approach as well, looking at reducing demand whilst increasing our supplies, so our water available for use, plus trying to restrain that customer demand into the future to resolve these deficits. We've got a particular issue in Suffolk with new non-household demand coming online, so poultry factories and things like that, herb washing, there's quite a lot of growth in, particularly in our Hartersmere zone. Abstraction, sustainability reductions as mentioned, and then again climate change as well impacting. So our best value plan, we are focusing on the demand management areas, so looking at compulsory metering in Suffolk by 2030 and in Essex by 2035. This helps inform our water efficiency programmes, where we target the highest users, domestic and non-domestic. And then it also helps us reduce leakage because we've identified where that water is going. So active leakage control in our mains network, and also helping to identify customer side leakage. So leaky loos we know is a really big issue. Your toilet can be leaking without you noticing it, but if you've got a meter installed, you can identify those leaks that are hidden from view. So as a company, and by that I mean our Northumbrian Water and Essex and Suffolk Water Patch, we're targeting that 50% leakage reduction, but we're doing slightly more in the north than in the south. We've been industry leading for leakage reduction in the south for some time, so it's difficult to then find more to fix as such to get that percentage reduction. But whereas in the north, a lot more water resources, maybe not so much focus on leakage reduction in the past, so we can do a little bit more there. So as a company, we meet that 50% reduction on average. So our supply schemes, we are working on the design for a reuse scheme at Lowestoft, so using Anglian Water's effluent from Lowestoft water recycling plant, putting that through secondary treatment, and then discharging that into the River Waveney just upstream of our existing intake on the River Waveney into Barsham Water Treatment Works. So that will augment the river supplies there that we can abstract at our existing water treatment works. We're also looking at the detailed zone for a new reservoir in North Suffolk, slightly smaller scale to Anglian Water's Fens and Lincolnshire reservoirs. And we're also connecting our 3 Suffolk water resource zones with some strategic pipelines. So this will be treated water coming from Barsham Water Treatment Works as a kind of hub, sending that south into Blythe and Hartersmere, our 2 South Suffolk water resource zones, so that essentially Suffolk becomes far more connected and resilient than it is now. If you're interested, I don't know if you come as far down into Suffolk, but into Essex rather. In Essex, we've got some outage reduction schemes, so looking at nitrate removal. We've got issues with increasing trends in nitrate in our river waters. We can't remove that. We're using our existing processes, so we're looking at putting in some nitrate removal plants there, and a new water treatment works down in the London boroughs to treat available groundwater. So I'll touch on something that's specific to us, which is our moratorium on new non-domestic supplies in the Hartersmere zone particularly. So we've got sufficient water resources to supply our current and future household demand and current business demand, but because of sustainability reductions, we don't have sufficient water to supply all the new non-domestic demand that's starting to come in. So commercial water efficiency is going to be really key for us, and we're working with these commercial enterprises looking at rainwater harvesting and that kind of thing, how they can be as water efficient as possible from the outset. So we're going to have to delay some of this new requests for non-domestic water whilst we're getting our new supplies built and online. So the kind of thing that they use the water for, meat production, particularly poultry in Suffolk, in the sort of eye airfield type area, irrigating crops, manufacturing, and then cooling as well. We've had a couple of requests recently in Essex for data centres, and the servers require a lot of water to cool them, which is a bit new to me, but they're asking for quite considerable amounts of water for cooling servers. So new things coming online all the time. So our Blythe and Northern Central zones are not covered by the moratorium. However, we're saying to businesses, you can't assume that we can meet all new requests for non-domestic demand. So just for people to contact us as early as possible so we can plan. So as Becky mentioned, the water sources planning guideline this time round gave us an opportunity to look at adaptive pathways. So rather than having just one plan, to account for uncertainty, we have these pathways with decision and trigger points. So I'm just going to pick out, we've got similar ones to Angling Waters here. So we've got the enhanced environmental destination scenario and high PCC. So where Becky mentioned that uncertainty in being able to reduce customer demand with our water efficiency programmes. We know what we're targeting and what we hope for, but obviously customer behaviour is a difficult one to predict. So we've got those adaptive programmes. For us, the habitats regulation sustainability reductions is a key one. So we've incorporated licence reductions due to WFD no deterioration already, but we have a further swathe of licence cuts on top of that, which go further than the no debt ones that are coming in under habitat regulation legislation. So the environmental targets are slightly different to no debt and go a little bit further as well. So at the moment, we're waiting for the Environment Agency to undergo their assessments to tell us what these licence reductions are going to be and exactly where, but they're quite significant. They target both surface waters and groundwaters as well. So, for example, at Ormsby Broad, Ormsby Water Treatment Works, we're looking at having licence cuts on both the Broad and the Bure and the ground licences all at the same time. So we need to replace that water with new schemes to enable to maintain supply to our customers. So we also had an adaptive programme called the North Suffolk Reservoir programme, and we've got this in our plan, a new reservoir in North Suffolk, but we very much felt that this was a scheme that we wanted to bring forward as quickly as possible because it's more sustainable than reuse and desalination, which are obviously very energy and sometimes chemical hungry. So a reservoir, you've got opportunities for biodiversity net gain, habitat creation, etc. So we wanted to ask our customers how they felt about what we needed to do to bring the reservoir forward. So we've got what's called accelerated funding from Ofwat. So we've got permission from Ofwat, our financial regulator, to start spending money now and not have to wait until the next AMP, until 2025, to start doing the detailed design for some of our schemes, and one of them is the reservoir. So the hope is that we'll be shovel ready by sort of 2027, 26, 27. At that point, we'll decide whether we have to go with the reservoir first or lowest off reuse first, and we can incorporate the uncertainty that we've got in our plan with regards to habitat regulations. At that point, we'll have the more information, and then we know which plan we can go ahead with. High PCC is an interesting one. It means that in Essex particularly, we're looking at potentially a reuse scheme at Southend, or what we can actually do is just defer our 1 in 500 year resilience a little bit. So regulatory deadline for that is the 2040, so we could actually defer it a little bit and still meet that rather than build the reuse scheme for just a couple of years essentially. And the enhanced environmental destination adaptive programme is quite significant in Essex. It removes a huge amount of water from our extraction licences, so we'd have to actually build a desalination plant, Canvey Island, we've got that identified, at something like 190 megalitres a day, which is absolutely enormous. So this is why it's really important for us to now take the indicative enhanced environmental destination licence reductions and investigate them on a site-specific basis to make sure that they are actually going to meet the environmental targets that they're designed to meet. And then the habitat regulations, adaptive programmes that I mentioned, we're looking at an additional reuse scheme in Caister for that to meet the further licence reductions. So quick summary. So yeah, forecasting baseline supply deficits in all of our zones due to non-household demand, abstraction licence, sustainable reductions and climate change. Consequently in Hartersmead, we've got that moratorium on new non-domestic supplies, and we'll be aiming to deliver an ambitious demand management strategy to reduce both domestic and non-domestic demand. We need significant new supply schemes as soon as possible. The new strategic pipelines, we're aiming to get those operational in 28-29, and then lowest off reuse in 30-31. So they'll be the first schemes that will come online. And then we'll make the decision whether to construct the North Suffolk Reservoir in 2026, following the detailed design, or alternative schemes depending on those adaptive programme outcomes. So next steps, we're just waiting now to receive final direction from DEFRA to publish our plans. They're all published on our website. So our statement of response to the consultation is there, and then our draft final plans will be there from next week. And they've got contact details there if you want to contact us with any queries. Okay.